It indicates that Trump is again interested in solving this conflict. He wants to get that Nobel Peace Prize he talks a lot about, but it doesn't seem to have had a lot of input from the Ukrainians. And so you need, if you want peace, you need both sides to agree to it. And so this may be just another pie in the sky effort that doesn't actually go anywhere.
The Russian embassy in London has now issued a statement about the Russian spy ship Yansar just off the Scottish coast. The statement says Russia's actions do not affect the interests of the UK and are not aimed at undermining its security. And meanwhile, reports are coming in that the United States and Russia have put together a new peace plan for Ukraine, and that America intends to push Ukraine to accept a framework which would include Kyiv giving up territory and some weaponry. We can get the thoughts now of Matthew Saville, who's a leader in military science at the Royal United Services Institute. Hello to you, Matthew.
Good evening.
Hi. Can I ask you first then about this plan, this new latest Ukraine peace plan put together between Russia and the United States? It does seem as if it's clearly more to the liking of Moscow, which I guess means just by extension that it's going to be less to the liking of Kyiv.
I mean, you might make that deduction based on Russia's objectives thus far. I mean, I should say, we don't know much more in terms of details on this other than that which is emerging in the media. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of denial on some of it. I think it's probably a little bit worrying in terms of what seems to be the mood music that neither the Ukrainians nor the Europeans, who have done a lot of heavy lifting recently to try and keep the US engaged, appear to necessarily be on the inside track of this. And so we might be back in a situation we were a few months ago, which is at risk of a deal being imposed over the head of the Ukrainians as they are looking down the barrel of a difficult winter and slightly on the back foot on the ground in Ukraine.
I mean, we have seen before, really quite recently, President Trump seeming optimistic about some sort of agreement being achievable, and it turns out what Moscow want is, well, all of their terms. They want the removal of the government in Kyiv. They want to remove effectively Ukraine's ability to defend itself and neutralise it as a military power, and other demands utterly unacceptable to Kyiv, despite the president's former optimism.
Yes, and it could be that this is just playing for time again, bearing in mind that Russia still seems to regard itself as having the stamina to outlast the Ukrainians. It's also worth reflecting on the fact that the progress it's made in the past 12 months have been incredibly expensive in terms of Russian lives, and there is damage to the Russian economy and its energy industry being inflicted by the Ukrainians. But certainly we think that they do have a fallback position, which is even if they can't topple the government, if they can break the Ukrainian will to resist and make them economically non-viable, independent of Russia, that is nearly as good as what they were trying to do previously. And a lot of this negotiation could therefore be playing around at the margins or just seeing whether they can dangle something enticing enough that the US, if you like, adds to the pressure on Zelensky, who's obviously facing a lot of internal pressure at the moment over corruption charges.
Right. Now, Matthew, let me just ask you about this report from the Defence Committee of MPs at Westminster, which talks about our country being nowhere near, they use that phrase, nowhere near ready to defend itself against an attack. Now, the language was pretty stark, pretty startling, except that if we had been getting into this condition of being hopelessly unable to defend ourselves as a country or as part of NATO, that must have been becoming steadily more apparent over years.
Yes, it certainly has. And there's been concern in the MOD and across government over what you might call the thinning out of our capabilities. I think it's worth treating this report in some respects as a bit of a stocktake against the SDR and against government rhetoric. The starting position would be is if the UK came under direct physical attack of the kind that Ukraine has, we would be part of a NATO alliance. So if Russian aircraft were attacking the UK, they would have to run the gauntlet of northern European countries' air defences and their own aircraft. So it's not that the UK is alone, but the issue is if we face that kind of scale of threat, we have very thin defences and in some cases gaps with which to protect ourselves. So we do have quick reaction alert aircraft to put up, but not many.
Yeah.
We do have a ship and a submarine to patrol our waters, but if we faced a serious attack, we would be heavily dependent on others to help us.
I mean, all the logic of what we're hearing from the Defence Committee, and it's supported by other experts, including former generals and academics, is that what is needed is a massive and very quick upgrade in our defensive capability, which would mean a political and economic, and on the part of the public, a psychological upheaval.
Yes, and I think that's actually at the core of what the report says, which is that the government has talked a good game, and it said, for example, we need integrated air and missile defence, which we fundamentally lack at the moment. But that rhetoric isn't been followed by the pace and the rate of investment. Lots of the increases in defence are probably still a couple of years away. I wouldn't be surprised if finances are so tight that we still see some cuts in the near term. And in the meantime, that public debate, that educating the public around what is and isn't a threat without being alarmist, hasn't really taken place. And in that context, maybe what the Defence Secretary was doing today was preparing people to actually understand that.
All right, Matthew Saville at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
There's been some reporting earlier on. It started earlier on, some hours ago, on the website, as our own Kate was mentioning. Axios said there was a new peace plan in the offing, that the Russian side and the American side, some of President Trump's team, have put together a new plan for an end to the war in Ukraine. We know little about it, except it does seem to be moving closer to Moscow and almost, I suppose, by definition, further away from Ukraine. I can welcome to the programme now to Pino and Friends Daniel Lippman, who is the White House and Washington reporter for Politico. Hello to you, Daniel. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Always welcome. So I don't know how this is running where you are. There's a new American-Russian plan for Ukraine. I don't know how new it is, but from what we see reported by Reuters, I think that the Moscow side seem to be reasonably pleased with what's being discussed. Do you pick up anything more on the substance of this?
Yeah, so this seems to adopt a lot of what Russia has wanted. We're still trying to figure out what's actually in the plan, but it indicates that Trump is, again, interested in solving this conflict. He wants to get that Nobel Peace Prize he talks a lot about, but it doesn't seem to have had a lot of input from the Ukrainians. And so that you need, if you want peace, you need both sides to agree to it. And so this may be just another pie in the sky effort that doesn't actually go anywhere.
It does seem, doesn't it, that the Ukraine haven't been especially in on the conversation, nor have European leaders who have been meeting regularly on some sort of cooperation if and when it comes to a ceasefire. They're not fully at all in on this. Although, if we talk about territorial concessions, that clearly means something more than Volodymyr Zelensky's been ready to give away. He has been contemplating a freezing of the line of contact at the battle line now, while the ceasefire begins and further talks continue. Further territory means giving, I guess, doesn't it? It means giving Russia more than they've been able to take by force.
Yeah, this is what we call rewarding bad behavior, and that this is not, he has his own domestic pressures and political reality he has to think about. He is weakened because of a corruption scandal involving his administration, but he was not elected to give away land, and so both sides have to feel like it's a good deal, or else it won't stick, and you'll have a ceasefire that will collapse in a few weeks or a few days. And so this is Trump trying to kind of bend and pressure Ukraine into accepting this, or else he will say, oh, I'm not going to give you more aid. But this does seem like a backdoor deal that may not go anywhere, but at least Trump is trying.
Yeah, I mean, the reporting that we have seen talks of America putting the pressure on Kyiv to go along with this latest deal, which makes you wonder, what does pressure mean in this context? Because America at the moment it has stopped giving military aid to Ukraine a long time ago. There has been a willingness on the part of the president to sell weapons, if not directly to Kyiv, then to Kyiv's friends to pass on. I wonder what pressure means in your view, Daniel.
Yeah, I think it could mean potentially halting those military sales to Europe as a pass-through. It could mean economic aid that could get halted. It could mean reducing intelligence sharing. And so it's the same types of cooperation that we have long seen the U.S. do with Ukraine. But remember, Trump has long kind of had a soft spot for Putin in his heart, and he's said it many times that he likes him and he respects him. But he also feels like Putin has yanked his chain around a bunch of different times, to the point that Melania Trump, the first lady, has said to Trump, do not trust Putin. He's continuing to bomb Ukrainian